And with that, I'd like to introduce Matthew Gardner.
Well, I forgot I've been doing this for 30 years. I'm officially old. Good evening, how are you all? Very well, thank you very much. Have any of you heard me speak before? Oh, wow, I've got some groupies, cool. So for those of you that haven't, the way I approach my comments, I do a top to bottom approach. So we'll talk about the US economy, which is curious right about now. What's going on in the US housing market, then distill it down, what's going on in the economy locally, and obviously then the local housing markets. So, by show of hands, who thinks the US economy this year will be better than last year? Okay, those are the real estate brokers. Cool. All right. Who thinks it's going to be worse? And who thinks it's going to be better? Could be. So that's not to make 100. So I mean, there could be a whole bunch of you saying it could be better, it could be worse. Budding economists, all of you. So it's interesting to see. Right now, we are in what I define as the Goldilocks zone. What's the Goldilocks zone? It's an economy that's not too hot, not too cold, just about right. And that's essentially where we stand today. For 101 straight months of job growth, it really is quite remarkable. We're right now at the second longest period of economic expansion in modern history. Come this June, we'll be at the longest. So we've had an amazing spell of job creation, of job growth. Secondly, the unemployment rate, very stable. We're knocking around between 3.8 and 4% right now. We're getting very close to what is called full employment. And that is a great place, obviously, for all of us to be. And finally, at long last, we're seeing some wage growth. And I'll talk more about that a bit later on because it's remarkably important. So all in all, we're in a pretty good shape. Now, when we talk about going forward, how do we define growth? It's GDP, it's the value of stuff, the value of goods and services we create as a nation. 2 negative quarters equals a recession. Back in 2008, we had 4 negative quarters, therefore the Great Recession. So I forecast going forward, this is my forecast by quarter through the balance of the year, we are still going to grow, but it will not be at the 3%, 4%, 5% GDP growth that people in the other Washington like to think is possible. They say that, I say one thing, poppycock. I say poppycock because I'm English and I can. It won't happen. We did have one quarter right about here, we broached 4%. So you could say, well, hang on, Gardner, we did it. Do you want to know why we grew at 4%? Soybean sales. I kid you not, soybean sales rose by 9,600% in the quarter to get ahead of trade tariffs, which are about to be implemented with China. So we kind of boosted growth then. In addition, there are obviously significant corporate tax cuts as well, which are now starting to drain away. So we kind of got a bit of an artificial bump. We are going to grow, but it'll be probably close to 2.1% this year. It will not be the 3 or 4% that the government like to think is possible. Just don't see it, and quite frankly, no one else outside of the administration thinks we can grow any faster. Now, the next chart I've got, I'm afraid, is the one bad one I have for you. I apologize in advance. This tells me one thing. We're going to have a recession at some point. It's basically what we talk about. You might have heard it recently, the last week or so. Economists talking about an inverted yield curve. What does that mean? It means when the interest rate on long-term rates is lower than short-term. So this is 10s minus 2s. Why is it important? Well, it has forecast accurately every recession for the last, give or take, 60 years. We're not there yet. We're about 14 basis points, about 0.14% away from that yield curve inverting. When it does, you have 9 to 18 months before we see a recession. And quite frankly, we're due. Recessions happen. You can buy my t-shirt, Amazon.com, 1995. No, they do. And quite frankly, we're due. Businesses work in a cycle. And we've had a very long run. I expect, and I started saying this about a year ago, everyone was laughing at me. Now, Goldman Sachs, JP Morgan, all these guys are now agreeing with me. It's quite likely, although not guaranteed, we will enter a business cycle recession by probably the end of 2020. So you've got a ways to go yet, but just do be prepared for it. All right, so that's the bad thing. The rest is all unicorns and popcorn. So we're going to be in good shape. Job growth. We added about 2.7 million jobs last year. We'll add a bit shy of that this year, but still a pretty decent number. And here's the funny situation we're in right now. Companies are starving for talent. They really are. They're trying to hire, they're trying to grow. Can't find people to work for them. When that happens, one thing essentially implies that we're going to start seeing some fairly significant wage growth. But here's the other thing. There's over 7 million job openings in America today. That's more job openings than unemployed people. So it's a very, very unique situation. I think we will start sucking up some of that excess capacity, but right now it is the employer's turn. If for those of you that work for companies, if you haven't gone to your boss's door to say, give me a pay raise, now is a really good time. And if you are a business owner, get ready for it. Now, we saw significant changes in tax policy. We reduced corporate tax rates down to 20%. And the opinion of the administration was trickle-down economics, which means they were going to take those tax savings and hand it off to the employees. Poppycock. Didn't work. We saw significant stock buybacks, increased dividends. We didn't see it following through. So that essentially is the way it works. But right now, because how tight the job market is, we are going to see fairly significant wage growth. And that is going to be a very positive thing because 70% of our economy as a country is us buying stuff. And so as we start seeing incomes increase, we'll start spending more, allows the economy to grow. The unemployment rate, everyone looks at the blue line, the 3.8%. I don't, I'm a geek, I look at the red line. That's the real unemployment rate. It includes people who want a job but who aren't actively looking for one. Right now it's running, it had a sort of significant drop down last month. North of 7% is still a bit higher than I want to see, but again, we are essentially getting very close to full employment. I anticipate that at the end of this year, the U3 number, the bottom line number, will probably come in about 3.6%, and that really is full employment. Inflation, benign, not really happening. We're not seeing it. And there are certainly some talking heads out there that were jumping and leaping about massive inflationary pressures, just not happening. It's a bit higher than the Fed would like to see, but bottom line is, if you were to ask me last fall how many times the Fed would raise rates this year, I'd have said probably 3. Now I'm saying none. And it's possible they might reduce rates before the end of the year. And that actually scares me. And it scares me for one simple reason. We are going to have a recession. The most valuable tool the Fed has to counteract recessions is lowering interest rates. Tough to do when you're at 2%. I know that. Japan tried, had the lost decade of the 1990s, where their interest rates actually turned negative. We don't want to go there. We need to see them rise so we can then pull them back down again. So it's going to be interesting to see how Chairman Jerome actually squares that away. So you look at consumer confidence, consumer sentiment. Again, the trend from the last recession is going up, but it's very noisy data. Confidence looks essentially at the next 6 months, sentiment 6 to 12 months. We're feeling better, but come last December, we started being a little bit cautious. I was actually giving a speech for Berkshire Hathaway last December in San Francisco. It was the day the Dow dropped 1,000 points. And I was speaking at lunchtime and everyone got up and went to the bar. They came back eventually. I was chatting to a guy afterwards, like, yeah, I lost $3 billion today. So you think you got problems? There's always someone out there that's got bigger problems than you. But it is, we're still feeling pretty good, but a little bit cautious still. But again, it's very noisy data. I have my own, the Gardner Misery Index. Oh no, it's a serious index. If you take the inflation rate annualized and the unemployment rate, it gives you a number. The lower the number, the happier we should be. So I look at this and say, guys, I mean, the last 2 or 3 years, why were we skipping down the street? Low unemployment, low inflation. You probably gather I'm not from around here, born and raised in Spokane, but, oh, you are awake, excellent. When I first came here from the UK, one thing I learned very quickly, and that is if you're not shopping, you're not happy. And we haven't been shopping for the last couple of years. Why? Because income growth. We were making as much money last year, adjusted for inflation, as we were making in 1998. So we've had a massive period of really stagnant wage growth. I like looking at average hourly wages. It's a very accurate representation of what's going on. And you can say, well, hang on, almost 3.5%, decent wage growth. But is it? Well, when you adjust that for inflation, it becomes below 2%. So it's not that good. It is certainly better than we've seen, but I would expect to see probably 3.5% to 4.5% wage growth this year. That's going to be a good thing because, again, companies are starving for talent. You've got to pay them. And so that's going to drive incomes. That's going to drive the economy for a while going forward. So what do I think big picture? This is a quote almost directly from President Xi. So President Xi Jinping said, no one wins a trade war. And he is absolutely right. This could be one of the reasons, if it's not squared away, that we end up having a recession. There's always got to be an exogenous shock, an outside force that creates recessions. This could be it. Now, I was actually chatting with the US ambassador to China 2 weeks ago, and his opinion right now is, yeah, I think we'll get a deal squared away, likely by the end of April, but it's going to be very loose. Both sides aren't going to get what they want, but there will be a form of agreement. That's going to be important. Secondly, split Congress. So the House is Democratic, Senate's Republican. Is that bad? No, it's not. Historically speaking, when you have a split House and Senate, the economy actually outperforms the long-term average. That doesn't concern me. Probably 2.1% GDP growth this year. Still expansion, not massive, but still growth. 1.3% job growth is fine. Unemployment is going to drop down to 3.6 by the end of this year, and we'll see some real wage growth. So at least for 2019, yeah, we're in pretty good shape to be growing at a reasonable rate. It's not going to be fantastic, but nor will it be a contraction or remarkably slow. So all in all, I think we're in pretty good shape. So that's the economy. How about the bigger picture on the housing market? Analyze this chart, study it. It's the most important thing I will show you tonight. So welcome to my world. It's funny, invariably, there's always somebody tries to take a photograph. I'm like, it's a joke. I mentioned recessions, so what I thought I'd do is go back and show you where home prices were when a recession started and where it ended, going back to the 1970s. You clearly see, other than the last recession, home prices do not go down. And they don't, they flatline. They essentially just hang out, we get through the recession, and then they start increasing again. Why did they last time around? Well, housing was the cause of the recession in the first place, so you would expect to see that. So even if we do have a cyclical downturn, I just really don't see it impacting the housing market at all. We'll just do the same thing, we'll plateau, we'll stop, and then we'll start increasing again or growing again after a period of essentially just kind of doing nothing. And that's what I expect to see. Housing inventory, believe it or not, is still at a generational low. I go back to 1999. This is the number of homes in the market in the country. It's remarkably low still. And here's the kicker, between 1999 and now, we added almost 24 million new households. Where are they living? I'll tell you where. Either rented accommodation or my basement. No, I kid you not, I have millennials. Who here sent their kid off to college and they graduated and then moved back in with you again? Invariably, there's always a handful to 25 people go, God damn it, me. Generally, you didn't do the right thing. Kid goes to college, sell house before kid comes back. It's what you're supposed to do. So it's very low. At the same time, however, sales, although last month's numbers were a bit of a spike, have started to soften. This does not make sense. We're creating households, household formations are up, sales should be rising. The reason why they're not is very simple. We've reached, as a country, an affordability ceiling. There must always be a relationship between home prices and incomes. It's part of a class I teach at the Foster School at UW. And we've reached that ceiling. And so until wages catch up, it's unlikely we'll see sales, to take the country as a whole, grow really by very much at all. Now, will they? Yes, I think they will, given income growth. But right now, we're kind of just hanging out, not doing very much. Homes with a price cut. This is interesting. One of the big stories, there's two big stories for this year in terms of housing, and one of which is the psychology of buyers and sellers. See, a lot of people have forgotten what a normal housing market looks like. When was the last time we had one? I would argue at the end of the 90s. When you think about it, 2000 through 2008, 7 depending on where you are, prices were doing this. 8 through 12, prices were doing this. 12 through 18, prices were doing this again. It's almost been 20 years since we last saw a normal housing market. And we've forgotten what it looks like. So as home sellers, we're thinking, this is great. I prune my rhododendron tree, my home is worth 50 grand more than the guy next door. And that's what we think. However, that's started to shift. And certainly in some markets, in local markets, we are seeing some increase in inventory, but home price growth is starting to slow, which is normal. And so people are having to understand, you know what, their home might not be worth what they think it's worth. And at the same time, home buyers, who have been quite frankly beaten up for decades now, and they really have, they're suffering from what I call buyer fatigue. And buyer fatigue is that they're getting tired of making multiple offers on multiple houses and losing them. And we actually had a situation a while ago, which came into play over the last probably 3 or 4 years, of home buyers sending these kind of groveling letters to the home seller, saying, like, please sell me your house. I was giving a speech in Colorado last month, and I was shown a letter. It wasn't from that would-be home buyer, it was from their dog. It was, I love your yard. Please sell my own your house. I think I threw up a bit in my throat. It really was. So we got to that point. Now, at the same time, when we start seeing some shifting in the market, then home buyers saying, wow, perhaps it's going to be our turn now. They're not as frenetic as they used to be. So, yeah, psychology of buyers and sellers is a big thing, but as is something else. And that's a move back to a more rational, more normalized housing market. And that's going to be a great thing, in my opinion. We haven't seen it for a very long time. Home prices contracted, home sales contracted last year by a little more than 3%. They'll grow modestly this year, but I expect to see a fairly significant jump. Again, we're talking about the US as a whole in 2020. Why do I expect to see that? Here's my forecast for home price growth. We'll probably increase by about 4.6% this year, 2.5% next year, and 2.5% price growth. Now, being sat here, you could think, God, that's terrible. And for Seattle, it is. But I've got data that goes back to 1890. Home prices in the country go up by inflation. That's my expectation for where inflation will be in 2020, therefore 2.5%. Given the fact we will see incomes rising, mortgage rates will stay low, that's why I expect to see a fairly significant jump in total sales next year. Have you heard of the Case-Shiller Index? You know, right, so Bob Shiller, nice guy, friend of mine, correction, was a friend of mine. He won the Nobel Prize for Economics 3 years ago. Become a Nobel laureate, think you know everything. Became a pain in my arse after that. Anyway, I like the index. It's a repeat sales index, so it looks at the sale of the same house over time. You bought your house in 2000, sold it in 2018. What do you buy it for? What do you sell it for? What's the spread? And that gets built into their index. So you see the blue line, bubble forming, bubble bursting, and we're way above the pre-recession peak. But I take the same data and I adjust it for inflation and adjust it for interest rates. This tells me the red line, that we're still 8% below the pre-recession peak when you adjust for inflation and mortgage rates. So I still think we've got a ways to go in terms of price growth before I'm becoming worried, quite frankly, at all. Again, we're talking about national numbers now. Foreclosures, there's still a few, but again, well below where we saw them. It was always interesting giving speeches in 2009, 2010, when I was saying, guys, next year is going to suck worse than this year. It's a lot easier now. So foreclosures are very low, don't expect to go up. We can afford to pay our mortgages. That's a good place to be. 1/4 of homes in America have more than 50% equity. 1/4 of all homes in America, 50% equity. It's a massive number. So we're sat on a very sizable amount of money. In case we start seeing prices soften, we're not going to be going into negative equity. Now, back in 2010, 2011, giving speeches for banks, and they had a thing called jingle mail. What was jingle mail? People were actually mailing the keys to their home back to the bank, and it jingled. They were walking away from it because they're in negative equity. That's certainly not the case, or even close to it right now. Massive equity increase. We're living in our homes longer. We used to move every 4 years. Now it's every 8 years. Why is this? Well, first of the bat is we're not moving as frequently for our work as we used to. Back in the day, find a job in Kansas, kid, dog, car, off we go. Now if we're changing jobs, we're staying in the same location. That means we're staying longer in our house. The second reason is interesting. We're not retiring when we're supposed to. We are staying in the workforce longer. And as long as we stay in the workforce longer, we're not going to move. In fact, 2 out of 3 pre-retirees would like to age in place. They don't want to move at all. There's only 2 reasons why they will. One is getting equity out of the house. That makes sense. And the other one, hips and knees. All of a sudden, I can't do those stairs anymore. And so now it's time to get to single-level living. There's a third reason, which doesn't apply today, but it's a little theory I'm building up right now. Imagine you are sat in your homes, and you've got your wonderful 3 5/8 mortgage, and imagine the year is 2022, and mortgage rates are running at about 7%. Are you going to move? I would argue a lot of people won't. That's going to put a massive amount of pressure, long-term, on the US housing market, because we're just going to stay put. Now, not moving for jobs is pretty much applicable across the country, apart from those Californians. When their economy slows down, they have no compunction. Kids, dog, car, move to Seattle. And they are coming up here in droves right now. Why are they coming up here? We are cheap, housing-wise. Our housing market is cheap. It's a 50% discount to the Bay Area. It's really quite remarkable. Rents are a 50% discount. Office space is a 50% discount. So they're moving up here. I mean, a lot of them are coming up because they believe our housing prices are cheap. So they're staying in our homes a lot longer. There are some cheap places to live in America. Here's the problem. No one wants to live there. And they don't. I've got to give a speech in Fairbanks, Alaska in a few weeks, which I'm not looking forward to. 20 below zero and 2 hours of daylight. Yay! But this is the percentage of homes that are affordable to people making median household income. So there are there. Now on the other end of the spectrum, there's some expensive markets. What do you find in common with all of these? They're all in California. And I put Seattle in for perspective, but literally they all are. Housing affordability in San Francisco is 6%. 6% of homes that traded last quarter are affordable to people making median income. That's quite ludicrous. It really is. And LA second, but 7.5 is still bad. Even though home prices are half, but incomes also are at a substantial discount to the Bay Area. Again, this is what's driving a lot of people to move up to Seattle because of housing prices, which are quite remarkably high, and affordability very low. My mortgage rate forecast, I redid this for you guys actually. So back last winter, I ran my model and it said that 30-year fixed rate mortgages would likely end this year at 5.2. I reran the model about 3 weeks ago. We're not going to see 5% mortgages this year, period. And right now, my longer term model is saying it's unlikely we'll see 5% mortgages in 2020 either. We could just notch on 5% at the end of 2020. So I look at this and say, wow, it is still remarkably cheap. And everyone agrees with me. 1990, mortgage rates were 6%. I'm sorry, what? No, 10% in 1990, and we still bought houses. Where were mortgage rates in October of 1982? Anyone remember? How much? 18 plus points, 20%, top of the class. Yes, 20% mortgages, and we still bought houses. So I look at this and say, wow, it's cheap, and everyone agrees with me, apart from millennials. They'll look and say, no. Where's my 3 5/8 mortgage? This is daylight robbery. It is egregious. It is a rip-off. And I say the same thing to them. Sit down, grasshopper. Let me explain some things to you. We are unlikely to ever see rates that low again. Literally. It's artificially created. Very, very unlikely we'll see it again unless we get back into qualitative easing and all these kinds of things, which I don't see. But the bottom line is, mortgage rates are very low and they're going to stay very low. Now that in concert with increasing incomes suggests that the housing market can continue to grow price-wise. And we're not going to see a 35% drop in prices, so thank you for that, Aaron. It's not going to happen. So we have all this demand. Why aren't builders building more? It would make sense. They should be throwing up sticks and bricks, left, right and centre, but they're not. And here's why. Single-family permits right now, we're running at an annualized rate of about 800,000. That is, at a minimum, 300,000 lower than it should be to meet household formations. So why is it so low? It makes sense that builders should be building a lot. Well, here's how I look at it. There's essentially 4 corners to housing development: land, labour, materials and regulation. So what a builder will do, he'll figure out all these costs, put some profit in, and spin it around, and it will spit out a price you have to sell the house for. Well, the trouble is with all these things, they're all remarkably expensive, and they really are. Land costs. Single-family lots, we were talking to Aaron about this a little while ago, in Bothell are trading for north of $300,000. Now, I like Bothell, but if you've got a $300,000 lot, you've got to sell the house for at least $1.2 million to make a margin. I like Bothell. I don't like $1 million to Bothell, and so they're not doing it. So land, certainly if you look at the western states, and certainly California, Oregon and Washington, we have water, we have mountains, but we also have what's called growth management. It defines where you can build and where you cannot build. So we're artificially limiting the amount of land or land supply. So land prices continue to grow, certainly in markets like Seattle. Secondly, labour. No one is learning to become a plumber, a carpenter or an electrician. No one is interested in going to vocational school. And it's a great shame, because everyone presumes you've got to get that 4-year degree, STEM subjects. I've got 3 sons, 29, 28 and 14. Don't ask. Anyway, so my 14-year-old, he could not drive a nail in straight for love nor money. He is useless. And he really is. William's into speed mathematics. He multiplies kind of 10-digit numbers in his head. That's what he's into. And so, yeah, he could not screw that, absolutely. Righty-tighty, doesn't get it. So, and he really doesn't. So the problem is that if we haven't got the labour to build the houses, what does that do to labour costs? It makes them go up. So now all of a sudden, contractors are out there. In fact, go back a little bit. Back in 2008, when the recession hit, a lot of the construction industry left. They got out of the business. They all went fracking. Tough thing to say this time of night. Anyway, so fracking they went off to the Dakotas, and they got into the oil business. They have not come back. To be honest with you, a qualified electrician today in Seattle is going to be making $120,000 to $140,000 a year. It's not chump change, but no one's doing it. That's a big issue. It could be a long-term problem if you don't get... See, housing's an organic good. We've always needed shelter. We will always need it. Who's going to build it? And we're going to get stuck there. Material costs. What did the Canadians ever do bad to us? Now, this is in all seriousness. We implemented a tariff, softwood lumber tariff on Canadian imported lumber. So we're actually kind of having to pay more for that lumber because of tariffs. So lumber prices are going up. Steel prices, aluminum prices going up. Why? Tariffs with China. Even PVC pipe, which really wasn't seeing price inflation much at all, that's going up because it tracks oil prices. So we're seeing about 0.5% per month inflation on cost, which is very significant. And finally, my all-time favorite, regulatory fees. Here's the kicker. 24 cents of every dollar spent to build a house are regulatory fees. Think about it. 24 cents of every dollar it costs to build a house are regulatory fees. So imagine you're a builder. Now, builders, were they building back in 2005? Yes, they were. Why? OPM, other people's money. They were basically borrowing massively over leverage from the banks. Now that's changed. Banks are very cautious. You can borrow maybe 63, 64% construction loan. That's about it. So you've got to come up with some equity. So again, they're being very, very cautious. Now, as we're not building enough, that puts pressure on the resale housing market. Just kind of makes sense. Got these households, got to live somewhere, and they're doing it. They're basically kind of that puts, again, significant upward price pressure on resales. We need to see more new construction. We're unlikely to see it, at least certainly not this year. Home ownership rate. Historically, so 65% of us own our homes, 35% rent, and all is right with the world. Or it was, until here. What happened? President Clinton happened. I remember I was actually teaching at Harvard back in '91, and I was sat in front of my TV, and President Clinton was doing his stump speech saying, everyone has got the right to own a house. And I'm sat on my TV going, no, they don't. However, Wall Street listened to him and not to me. And that's when we started coming out with these exotic mortgage products. My all-time favorite, the zero down option arm with cash back at closing. So you put nothing down, you've got no credit, you take out 105% mortgage. What could possibly go wrong? And it worked. And it worked through his entire presidency. And then President Bush came along, said the same thing. And it worked until it didn't. You almost hit 70% in terms of ownership. Market crashed, obviously, housing bubble burst, overcorrected like we always do. But now we're trending back up there again. And I will argue all day long, we'll hit 65% again the next quarter or two. Why? And actually, more than that, we'll get back to 65 in the next few years. We will get back to 66 or even 67% again. What's going to drive all that demand? First-time buyers. They're going to buy more homes in America than any other age cohort this year and going forward. What about them? It's these guys. It's them millennials. They are actually creating households and they're moving out of rented accommodation. I mean, they are actually... They are going to buy. 69% of millennials think buying a home will be the most astute financial investment they ever make. 71% think they can't qualify for a mortgage, though. And so, as they are doing it, my oldest son, he's kind of getting beyond the casual hookup with a girlfriend. They're probably going to get married at some point. And when they do that, yes, they are going to have children. And when they do that, they are going to move out of apartments. It's going to be funny to watch. At some point, he will have to sell his $3,000 bicycle, and he'll be buying a Subaru. It's going to be great. So, what about, let's look at millennials. They're an important demographic. This looks at the major age cohorts across the country. Millennials, the oldest millennial turns 38 this year. They growed up. And I said, they are creating households, they are going to get married, they are going to have kids, and they are going to buy. But the trouble is there going to be anything out there that they can afford? That's the biggest issue that I'm seeing today. And it's a major problem for them. But they are getting older. And they're a massive demographic. How massive? All right, now, there's 79 million millennials in America. Now, baby boomers used to think they were the bee's knees back in the day. No, these guys outnumber baby boomers by about 10 million. A lot of them. They're the largest they're the cohort in the workforce today. So they're working, they're doing it. And here's the fun part. 1 million millennial women are having babies every year. And again, they're not going to do that in apartments. Safety and schooling, 2 reasons why. And certainly if you look at urban apartments, they're going to take that, they're going to move out. Now, my dear friend over at Zillow, and yes, I do part of that Zillow survey, their chief economist, Svenja, is a good friend. The one thing we disagree on, she thinks that millennials are going to want to buy out in the sticks. In Seattle, they're going to go out to the Sammamish Plateau. And I'm like, no, they're not. At least they might have to. They might be forced out there because of price, but they want to be in ex-urban areas. 1 foot in town and 1 foot out. Markets like Columbia City, Georgetown, Burien, Green Lake, Wallingford, Ballard. That's where they want to be. They do not want to be out in the sticks. The trouble is it's getting remarkably expensive. And a good example of that actually is Columbia City. Back in the day, I was driving through Columbia City, I didn't stop. In fact, I kind of locked my doors and kept on going. Now I don't stop. I can't find anywhere to park. 2 of the best restaurants I've been to the last year are down in Columbia City. So it really is remarkable vitalization going on there. The trouble is now, townhome product down in Columbia City is trading in the $600,000 to $800,000 price range. Tough for a first-time buyer, tough for a millennial to buy. Although that is the kind of product they do want. So they're out there, there's a lot of them. Now, you mentioned earlier on, unfortunately, went off to college, came back and moved in with you again. There's a way around it. And there it is. I believe the sales of Winnebagos are going to triple in the next 5 years. But they're stuck with a lot of issues. One of the biggest issues is student debt. There's $1.5 trillion of federal student debt outstanding today. One person is defaulting on a student debt loan every 6 seconds in America. Now, 1.5 trillion, it's a big number, right? 12 zeros. How do you make sense out of it? All right, take all of our credit card debt as a country. It's about $860 billion. We owe 1/3 more on our student loans than on our credit cards. And here's the kicker. You could file bankruptcy, I hope no one does. Credit card debt goes away. Student loan debt doesn't. It stays with you forever or until the government chooses to forgive it. And good luck with that one, at least with this administration. Anyway, but they are working it down, they are paying it off, it just takes them a while to get it paid. But they'll get there eventually. Yeah, it just takes a while. All right, so I looked at where millennials were buying. So this is the markets in which my company has a presence, and the percentage or share of sales which went to millennials in 2018. Do you think the number is high for Seattle or low? Low? Okay. Well, it's certainly not. Where's my favorite? Billings. Half of sales. Billings must be a hip place to move to. Half of all sales went to millennials. In here, 45%. It's a lot bigger number than some people would assume it to be. So what do these millennials look like? They're interesting. So 58% male, 27% female. I know that doesn't make 100, but that is the world in which we live these days. 53% are married. Makes sense being married. Double income, you can make that work, especially with no kids. We used to call them dinks back in the day. We did, D-I-N-K, yeah, double income, no kids. They were 31 years old, so they're not the oldest millennials. They borrowed about $385,000, bought a house worth just shy of $500,000, and here, they were putting 18% down. The bank of mum and dad is still open for business. Mum and dad are still lending the money. 1 in 4 kids actually goes to their parents to help them out with the down payment. But this is the most interesting thing to me. They've got credit. Average FICO score was 741. So they got credit, they've got down payments, creating households. Millennials are going to be driving the housing market in the country, I believe, for the next decade. They're going to be massive. If you could figure out how to build a house In whatever market that's affordable to a millennial, you'll make an awful lot of money. And you really will. So, that's them. Is there a housing bubble? Answer still, no there isn't. This is average credit scores on conventional from Ellie Mae. We're down at 750, so we went from the sublime, my dog Fido qualifying for that zero down option arm, to the ridiculous, no one qualifying. Actually, I refinanced my house a couple of years ago. It was like giving blood. I kid you not, I had my mortgage broker call me up and said, Matthew, why did this bank account go down in value? I went grocery shopping. Now, I know it's Whole Foods, but come on, guys. It literally was. So banks don't make money at 4% mortgages, period. And therefore, they're not really interested in lending money. So they're making it very, very hard. So credit quality is remarkably high. Secondly, if you take the value of every home in America, it's about $26 trillion. Now, what's interesting about this is that housing values are rising, but so is equity. We're set on $15.5 trillion of equity. So home prices are going up. But this orange line is an interesting one. We're not overextending. Mortgage debt is lower now than it was in 2008. So we're putting far higher down payments. Again, I try and find bad things for the market. That's my job. Tough to do. A lot of equity, and we're not over-leveraging, and we've got great credit. It's tough to see that there's a problem with that, quite frankly. So there isn't a bubble. Qualifying is very, very hard. Mortgage rates, still remarkably low. They'll trend up remarkably slowly. Demand, yeah, again, young buyers. And that will then lead into move-up buyers and then move-down buyers. It's going to be good. We're not building, so that puts pressure on resales, allows housing prices to continue to rise. And we've got a ton of equity. Now, there are housing markets in America that are overvalued. Don't get me wrong, there really are. But just because they are, it doesn't mean we're in a bubble. Bubbles define speculation, just not seeing it. So I really don't think that's the case. So for the US-wise, 4.5% price growth this year, decent number. Renters will become buyers where it can be cheaper to buy than rent. Think about it this way. If you're renting a newer 2-bedroom apartment in South Lake Union, you're paying between $2,900 and $3,300 a month in rent. That equates to about just shy of $600,000 mortgage payment. That's what's going to start happening. First-time buyers will buy more homes this year than any other age cohort. Boomerang buyers, these are an interesting group. People who sadly lost their homes to foreclosure. Did they rent apartments? No, they didn't. They rented single-family homes. Why? Kids, stuff. So too much stuff, rent it. Now, as of this year, this demographic now qualified to buy a home again. And not all of them will, but a substantial component actually will get back into the housing market. Now, why is that important? It's important for several reasons. The biggest one is the fact that as that happens, we've seen rental demand for single-family rentals skyrocket. Rental rate growth has been phenomenal. That's not going to drop, but it should just start softening a little bit. LA and San Francisco, they're the markets which scare me, quite frankly, more than any other. And they're ones which just cannot keep on going at the rate they are. Pricing is just ridiculous. Affordability is just doesn't exist. So those are the markets which actually worry me more. And locally to here, closest I could probably come up with would be Bend, Oregon. It's a market which scares me a little bit. Not as bad as these markets, but it's just out there. We've seen massive price growth. I just don't see how that's sustainable. But again, the Bay Area, Southern California. So the US housing market's doing it, US economy is doing that. What about our local market? As was mentioned earlier, I sit in the Governor's Council of Economic Advisors, and Governor Inslee loves it when I show him this slide. Almost 3% job growth in Washington State. So we're doing remarkably well here. Utah doesn't have recessions, never has, never will. Colorado's still doing well, energy sector. California, though, is starting to slow down. But I will tell you the hidden economic secret. Anytime New Mexico is expanding, all is right with the world. No one works in New Mexico. So even they can grow by 1.5. So that's the good part. This is also important for another reason. There is a significant amount of equity on the East Coast that's looking to deploy. And they're looking at the same numbers I'm looking at and saying, Seattle. I counsel a couple of hedge funds based back in Connecticut and New York. And back in the day, every time I went there, it's a standing joke. You're from Seattle. Southwest Alaska, huh? Yeah, not funny now. Wasn't funny when you said it before. They think that it is. Now they're saying, no, now perhaps we're looking at these same numbers, perhaps we want to play in your backyard. There's a reason why there's more cranes in Seattle today up than any other city in America. More cranes than there are in Los Angeles. It's quite remarkable. So there's a lot of capital being deployed, not just from the East Coast, although that's certainly substantial, but globally as well. A group called FIRE, the Association of Foreign Investors in Real Estate, put out an annual report of where are Asian investors spending their money. And I expect to see London, I expect to see New York, I expect to see Berlin, little old Seattle. We're a player. There's a reason why Columbia Tower traded to an entity out of Hong Kong last year. So they own the tallest tower in Seattle. So they are looking to deploy their money, they're coming here. And it's a global market, it's kind of quite remarkable. And if you look at just the markets within the US, we're third, behind New York and LA. There's a lot of money which is looking to be spent, looking to be invested. It's coming to the Pacific Northwest, it's coming to Seattle. Now look at major West Coast markets. This is the last 12 months employment growth. You can say it's 2%. That's actually a figure which is not, well, BLS, the Labour Department, look at things in a different way than the state does. Anytime Tacoma is growing, all is right with the world. But look at Boise's growth. Boise, I'm actually putting down as the fastest price growth market for 2019 of any other, certainly in the western United States. Number 1 is Boise. Number 2 is Las Vegas, Nevada. And number 3 is Spokane, Washington. I was in Spokane giving a speech in January. I saw a traffic jam in Spokane. What is wrong with that? It's very surreal. So why are those markets going to grow more than we are here? Very simple. Housing prices. You can buy a single-family new construction home in Boise, in Vegas, for less than $300,000. Good luck finding that anywhere around here. Maybe Ferry County, possibly, but it's a long ways away. So as you're doing that, what are companies thinking? They're looking at different markets, and the most important thing they think about is how much do I have to pay people? Biggest component of salaries, cost of living, and that's why they're choosing those markets. So I think we need to be careful here when we look at affordability, which I'll talk about in a little bit, and not to get to a point whereby we're a disincentive for companies to expand here because they have to pay people too much. But I'll talk about that in a little while. My forecast for employment growth for the metropolitan area, which is King and Snohomish counties combined, is about 50,000, of which about 42,000 will be in King County. So very robust employment growth. Probably 7,000 or 8,000 will be in Snohomish County, which is starting to come back. Snohomish County has been slowing down a lot because of aerospace. However, Boeing, up until recently, was hiring fairly dramatically again, which is good for the 777X and 797 program. So as they will grow, but most of the growth is without a doubt going to be right here, going to be in King County. Look at what we do in the region. Education, health services. If you are a teacher, if you're a nurse, you've always got a job, you just don't make any money. I said my sister's a teacher, her paycheck is an embarrassment to paychecks, but it is what it is. Information, obviously a major component of our market here, doing well. Construction growth, leisure, a lot of hotel rooms. Now we do see a contraction in government. That's a bit of an anomaly. It's actually state education which is slowing down. It makes no sense. I've got to call into the state economist to find out what's going on there. If you X out that, significant growth in actually fairly high paying sectors, which is good. The unemployment rate right now is at 3.4%. We are at full employment in Seattle. That's great. Better than the state, better than the country as a whole. So that again screams wage growth more than anything else. Now migration is interesting. Basically about kind of 38,000 kids were born here last year. And that kind of makes sense, although it doesn't right here. We had a recession. We had more babies. We should have been doing less. We were clearly doing more. So, and subtract the 20,000 people that die, gives you a net births minus deaths of about 18,000 people. That makes sense. But what happens when you add in people moving here from somewhere else? Well, then you add in another 35,000 people came here. It peaked in 2006, been trending down. And it's interesting when you think about why have we seen that slowing. So I broke it out to King and Snohomish counties, obviously, and the decline was very much in King County. Why? Housing prices. So historically speaking, your jobs in Seattle, if you could afford to live here, you did. If you couldn't afford that, jump to your car and you drove north. It's that drive to buy. And you keep on driving until you find something you can afford. It's why God created Marysville. But So just checking you're awake or not. But even that actually has now started to change. Now people are getting their cars and they're driving south to Pierce County because Snohomish County is becoming unaffordable. I was down with the governor 2 months ago, heading down for my meeting in Olympia, 6:30 in the morning. The traffic jam coming north into Seattle was past Tacoma at 6:30 in the morning. It's quite remarkable. But again, because of affordability, it's what people are having to do. And so the drop really, in terms of slowing population growth, is really a function of housing prices. They're just kind of getting up there to a point whereby a lot of people that like to live here just can't afford it. Who remembers this sign? Anyone old enough? A few. 1973, Hendricks and Partners, real estate brokers, put this sign on I-5 after the Boeing bust of 72. 1973 was the last year our region lost population, i.e. we had actual out-migration. Why? End of the Vietnam War. But what's more important is the fact that we went where Boeing went. Boeing, founded in 1905 in South Lake Union. If they were growing, so were we. When they were contracting, so were we. Not a good place to be when you rely on one specific company or one specific industry. But thankfully, now we've diversified. This is just some of the companies that call Seattle home, and it's a pretty impressive list. Thank you, Lakeside School. Literally. So we've got some great companies here. And so the more we diversify, the more it allows our economy to continue to grow. And that's very much the case. Now, looking a bit more locally, it's obviously looking down from Queen Anne into South Lake Union, and some of the companies who have a significant presence. Now, Facebook is in now, it says 815,000 square feet. I should be able to put a 1 in front of that, but it's the worst kept secret known to man. They're going to take another 1 million square feet fairly shortly in Seattle. So that'll be almost 2 million square feet with Facebook. Who else? Well, then you've got Google, almost 1.6 million square feet. Who here has to drive on Mercer Street with any frequency? Oh boy. This spot right here, that's now almost finished. When Google move into that, they will have 4,500 Googleites pouring out of there every night. And if that's not bad enough, imagine you've got a hockey game going on at Key Arena. Or imagine you've actually got, at some point, a basketball team at Key Arena. Oh, think about the fact that Expedia moving into Interbay from Bellevue. You think Mercer's a mess now? You ain't seen nothing yet. And you really haven't. But who's the behemoth in Seattle? Amazon, right? What about Amazon? Yep, and that's a real number. Right now, they occupy just shy of 10 million square feet today. They've committed to 30 million. I've X'd out Rainier Square, which they're going to be subleasing. There's approximately 48,000 Amazonians working downtown Seattle today. That's going to get to north of 65,000. Pretty impressive. Who here has Amazon Prime accounts? That's the brilliance that is Jeff Bezos. Every year we send him $8 billion for free shipping. And he kind of needs that money right about now, but different story. But he's not going away. They're not been out. You can talk about HQ2, HQ3, HQ7, 9, 12, 15, whatever it's going to be. They're not leaving here. Now, pulling out of Long Island Sound was curious, however, to the benefit of Bellevue. They're likely to have over 10,000 people that I can calculate will be working in Bellevue within the next couple of years. And what's interesting about that, that will make Amazon the single largest employer in the city of Bellevue. Kemper Freeman's going to hate it. And he really will. He used to be the big kahuna, maybe not so much. So they're not going anywhere. Essentially, Amazon outgrew Seattle. Simple as that. There's only so much land that belongs to Outclice that they could build on and develop and occupy. And also, they believe they've tapped our talent pool. What do I mean by that? There's 6,500 job openings at Amazon today in downtown Seattle. They can't fill. 6,500 job openings. It's massive. And is that driving demand for housing? Yes. And progress it on from there. If you look at the IPOs, which are going to be filed in the next year, is that going to be a lot of them going to be companies with significant presence here, like Lyft, like Uber? Absolutely. So that's going to be a positive thing as well. So when I look at technology in the technology sector, is that going to be driving our housing market? Yeah, it really will, for a very considerable time. Now, you might hear somebody in the government trying to think about breaking up Google and breaking up Amazon. I would find that remarkably difficult for them to do, quite frankly. They can argue antitrust all day long. I just don't see it happening. And to be honest with you, It's not as if Amazon just sold TVs. They did, I'd be worried. I ordered garbage bags yesterday on Amazon. I don't buy anything anymore, it just gets delivered, it's great. So are they going to continue to expand? They will. Their presence here is not going to shrink. I mentioned about people moving here from somewhere else. This essentially, if you look at tech workers and how much they make, average software engineer, in different major tech centers across the country. Most expensive obviously is the Bay Area. Now why would somebody move from the Bay Area up here when their salary will be lower? Does that make sense? Well, no, it doesn't. But if you adjust for cost of living, then you're making 50 grand a year more in Seattle than you're making in the Bay Area. That's not the best one. The best one is Austin. If you're out of the Bay Area to Austin, Texas, you're making almost $85,000 a year more given housing costs. So that's what's driving a lot of these Californians up here, because I mentioned earlier, price-wise, we're cheap. So growth will be good, 2.3% for the metro area, so most of the jobs are going to be in King County. Tech's going to be good, it is a driver. And it's not just technology per se, biotechnology, Fred Hutch. I really think that an entity in Seattle will find a cure for a form of cancer within the next probably 5 years. So it's going to be very, very significant. We can continually grow there. Income growth, I might be a bit pessimistic at 4.5%. It could be 5% income growth. Very, very solid. We'll do well, but I do fear city councils. Companies, when they're moving here, they like predictability. And I was kind of fairly heavily ensconced in that ridiculous, redundant, stupid, asinine, the head tax from last year, ridiculous. And so what we need to find are councils which aren't going to try and go down that road. Because again, companies want predictability. They don't want to think they're going to move to Seattle and then they're going to get taxed. And not just that, we need to look at zoning, we'll talk about that in a bit. But it's not just here, but certainly most specifically here. November's election is going to be interesting. I really think it's going to be a massive shift. 7 out of 9 council members up for re-election, 4 of which already said they're not going to run. So we'll see how it plays out. But it's going to be interesting to watch. So, housing markets. So we talk about, I'll start again, big to small. If you look at the tri-county market, I use this because this is how Kay Schiller defines Seattle. You say Seattle, they actually include King, Pierce, and Snohomish counties. So a lot of these markets are well above the pre-recession peak, and certainly Seattle's up by almost 27%. But the change in momentum, I look at what's called the second derivative, which looks at the last 12 months compared to the 12 months before. We are seeing a slowing down. There are some markets which are still underwater. We have seen a significant slowdown here, which only makes sense because we have seen massive price growth. So you see the trend bubble bursting up, softening, certainly. We're still above that long-term trend, but I expect to see home price growth start to slow. I do not like any market where prices are growing by 8, 10, 12, 14%. It's unsustainable. So we're not making that much more money every year to service the debt. So when you see that, those are markets which scare me. So we will start trending back to that long-term average I expect to see as we move forward. So for King County, again, it's like any more myopic, sales are off by 10% last year because of affordability. Not just that, we saw a massive jump in supply that came on middle part of last year. Why is that? There was a lot of investors, and certain condominiums as well as single family, that saw mortgage rates start to rise. They thought price growth was peaking. Now it's a good time to get out. If it was real people, I know where they were moving to. It wasn't real people. There's a lot of investor sales. So you sort of slow down, but look at that price growth. If you bought in 2011, 2012, tough place to be. You've done remarkably, remarkably well. So we're not back up to where we were before the recession, but I would argue we will see sales increase this year. Probably get close to where we were in 2017, might be a bit shy of it, but again, I expect to see a pickup. Listings and sales. Kind of frenetic, I know, but it's, if you look at demand, the red line, demand is solid for about almost 2,000 sales per month in the county of single-family homes. So it is doing pretty well. Now you could argue, well, how can those lines cross? Well, sales are the total sales in the month, and listings are the number of listings the last day of the month. Therefore, it can actually cross. So it's still, we saw a big jump in listings, drop back down again. I think it will increase, but at a more modest rate this year. We did not see a spring market last year. We really didn't. It kind of kicked in the May, June time. I think we will see it this year, but I think, again, it's that move back to balance, which is what I would expect to see. How to lie with statistics. And I show this for one reason. Back last December, I think it was, there was a reporter from a local publication that put out, he wrote an article. He said, if you owned a house in Seattle, you've lost $70,000 in the last 3 months. And I read it like, you cannot say that. And you try to cherry picking the numbers. You look at sales price in September versus December. You can't. So if you take an individual month, so I looked at 2018, February versus last month. And King County, yeah, down. The metro area, which is essentially the city of Seattle, down. East side, down. But what happens when you look again at the 12-month moving average? Then it kind of looks like this. The good news doesn't sell papers. Seattle Times. It doesn't. Mike Rosenberg. Anyway, no. But it's what you do see is a lot of people do read those things, and they start believing it. The house price is going to crash. They're not. But if you cherry pick the numbers, yeah, then sure, you can always find anomalies. That's possible. But it doesn't actually work that way. Homes list prices, we peaked at almost $1.5 million for King County. I'm not talking about Queen Anne. For King County, it's remarkable. Pull back down again because all of a sudden homeowners understood the fact that perhaps their house wasn't worth what they thought it was. But again, we started to see it shift back up in the last 2 months. We kind of overcorrected as I expected, but price growth, we'll get back up probably close to that pre-recession peak, or at least last year's peak, by the end of this year. But it's going to be a slower organic growth. Homes to price cut, 12.5%. Again, that explains why we saw those price cuts on that last chart. That's going to be essentially where I expect it to be through the course, but it's already going to change. But again, it's understanding the psychology of home sellers. Perhaps their homes aren't worth what they think it is. And so accurate pricing, well-priced, well-positioned homes are still selling. They're still selling remarkably quickly. And that's the fascinating part about the story. We average about 6% long-term. Going back to 2003, we grew by 61%, dropped by 30%. Homes have doubled in King County since 2012. That is an insane figure, it really is. I want us to get back to this around 6% number. Now, we won't do it this year, we'll be above it, but we are certainly starting to slow down toward that trend. Months of inventory, everyone looks at this like months of inventory is based upon how long it would take to sell every home that's on the market, given the number of sales in the previous month. Now, again, the media says, wow, the time on market, months of inventory is jumping. Well, it's jumping to 1.5. That's kind of like 6 weeks. What is a normal market? In Seattle, it's 4 months. 4 months. Now, if internationally, it's closer to 6, but here it's 4. So it is still a very, very tight market. But again, people are looking at numbers and they're reading the newspaper, and you've got these reporters saying, oh, we've seen a big spike in the time it takes to sell. Increasing months. Yeah, but it's still remarkably low. Housing permits, single-family permits, not even close. We poured about 4,300 permits last year. My calculations, we're going to have demand for over 26,000 new owner-occupied housing units in the next 5 years. 26,000. The putting number of permits, not going to work. It really won't. And so because of that, again, builders are being cautious. They're not putting permits because of construction costs, permitting, fees, etc., all the things we talked about. So when you see this low level of permits, that puts pressure on resale housing because people have to live somewhere. Housing affordability, King County, problem. Housing, this is analysis I've done since the early 90s with UW. Housing has never been affordable for a first-time buyer in King County, ever. But it's not affordable for all buyers now. This is the problem. This is what's pushing people further north, certainly, or further south. And even to a degree, across the water, Kitsap County. Now, it's interesting about it. There's a value to our time, right? So we will live closer to where we need to be. And that's why house prices kind of look like a wedding cake, right? The closer you are to the job centres, the more expensive it is. So a house in Capitol Hill, average 1.6 million. In Auburn, 330,000. They're 16 miles away. Do you ever try to commute from Auburn to Seattle? Don't. And that's why we pay more to live closer to where we have to be. And that has put massive upward price pressure on housing close to the job centres. I mentioned Kitsap County. We're not, light rail is going to happen at some point, Now, fixed rail is one thing. Now, to say that I can go to Redmond in 2024, that's great. I don't want to go to Redmond. You can't make me. And so fixed rail won't work. So what's the other options? Then you look at buses. Well, here's the kicker. We're not going to build any more roads. Seattle is the only city in America I've ever been to where on a major interstate thoroughfare coming into town, the number of lanes of traffic becomes less and not more. It's very surreal. It's supposed to be bigger, not fewer. But think about coming down I-5 from the north. You can't add on more lanes because you'll fall into Lake Union. So you can't, you're stuck. That means also you don't like getting on buses. Because as long as I'm stuck in the same traffic as a bus, I'm going to be in my single occupancy vehicle. And we won't. So I've got to think about it. Passenger-only ferries, if you get those, they work up in Clinton remarkably well. Even now, little old Bremerton, if they ever get the damn thing to work, it would be a good thing. Anyway, so, but I expect to see, potentially, I'd love to expand our ferry system. Because Kitsap County's got a lot of land. And if you can get across the water, not so much of the traffic jams coming across the sound, that would be a good thing. Because the only way I see is fixing it, because we're not going to build more roads. Light rail is going to help. Transit-oriented development absolutely will help to a degree. But it's still going to be a problem, us getting to the job centres. Multifamily homes, again, we dropped off, but prices still grew. Very similar scenario. It's funny you look at multifamily condo versus single family. What I see about condominiums right now is a thing, we're not seeing that much in the way of new supply of condos. Why? Condominium Act. If you're a condo developer, you will get sued. I guarantee it. Within 3 years of certificate of occupancy. It all started back in the 80s with EFUS, with kind of leaky condos, these kinds of things. Condos don't leak anymore, but you are going to get sued. And you can insure yourself against being sued, or for, because the fact you know you will be, it will cost you $55,000 per unit for wrap insurance. So no one's interested. The only people building condos today are either Chinese or Canadian. And in Stadium Lots, Kevin Daniels is building a project down by CenturyLink, but that's with Chinese money. So we're hopeful we'll get a bill through this year which will change that, but that's not going to solve the problem. And here's why. Type 1, vertical high-rise construction, if you're not selling those units for $1,000 a square foot, you're not going to make a margin. So $1 million for 1,000 square feet. How deep is that market? It isn't. So because of that, I think we'll expect to see probably more mid-rise, ex-urban areas, see more condos, if we can get that legislation done. Again, look at that month, February versus February, looks horrible other than Southwest County, but when you look over the last 12 months, it's a very, very different picture. So are we seeing a slowing down in home price growth? Yeah, but it's not the kind of numbers that the media, there's no press people here, are there? God, I hope not. Okay, there are. So it's good. List price, again, we also hit $1 million in King County for a multifamily. That's quite insane. Settle down, but again, you look at the longer term trend. We've averaged almost 6.5%. There is demand for multifamily, certainly townhomes. I mentioned millennials, where do they want to be? That's where they want to be. 1,200 to 1,500 square foot townhomes with tuck under garages, they will take that all day long. But the trouble is, again, looking where you're looking, you're paying between $600 and $1.1 million for that in Seattle today. It's what they want, but they just can't afford it. 2 months of inventory right now, again, is still not balanced. So we look at King County, again, psychology, big thing. We have an expectation as home sellers. That's now starting to soften a bit, and that's okay. Price will rise, again, county-wise, 7.5%, just shy of that this year. That is still above the long-term average, but it is still trending down. That's okay. Mortgage rates, cheap, remarkably cheap. Again, we won't hit 5% this year, unlikely to hit 5% next year. We're going to be good, but affordability does worry me. But a move towards balance, that makes sense. And we have some issues, well, we'll talk about Seattle issues in a second. So finally, before I get into it, this is now the city of Seattle, on what's going on here. Single family. So jump, but again, we sell about 600 homes per month, single family homes in the city. Decent number again. Even though we saw a jump in listings, demand was still, relatively speaking, robust. Resale, single family, again, saw a big inflection. Why we saw a lot of people listing, investors listing their homes for sale, because we had a massive spike in terms of price. We're also seeing interest rates starting to notch up through the second half of last year. But look at sales prices. Yes, we did see a correction, but the trend, longer-term trend, is still very, very solid. So you've now got an average sales price of just shy of 800,000 for the city, which is pretty impressive, actually. Sales are off by 11%, the price growth, again, still significant. Not balanced. Again, it's going to be up closer to 3.5 to 4 for me to actually say that we are in a balanced market, but the trend is slowly happening. That will continue. Remember I talked about earlier on? So we look at the ballad, wow, prices dropped. But again, it's the month versus the month. When you start looking at the average, how does it look? Then it becomes almost 5%. So we've seen those prices increase. And again, substantial in Queen Anne Magnolia, that's where I expect to see home prices have done. It's just remarkably expensive, but there is still demand for that. Listings, again, we saw a big jump in listings here. But I think that's going to start softening a bit as we move forward. This is 12-month change. So February this year versus February. Yeah, February this year versus February last year. On the multifamily side, very similar. Again, most markets in the Puget Sound region, in fact, most markets across the West Coast saw a big jump in listing inventory come in towards the second half of last year. We almost hit 1.6 million. I'm trying to figure that one out. I think there were some very expensive condos at Four Seasons or something, which came online, which kind of skewed it. Actually, there were some resales in the Nat Bose's project. Insignia, thank you, which caused that. Off about 15%. That's not a function of lack of demand, quite frankly. It's a function of price. And so we want to see people are interested in condominiums. But the problem with condominiums is homeowners association dues. For a lot of people, they're paying as much in HOA fees as they are paying in their mortgage. Four Seasons, great project. It's $1 per square foot HOA dues on demised and non-demised space. So you're in the penthouse there, which has got a 2,500 square foot deck. You're paying $2,500 a month for the deck. And what do you get for that? You get the ability to get, there's one guy got it built into his contract. He can get a steak sandwich 24 hours a day. That's kind of it, it's what you get for buying this. So HOA dues are a big, big issue. Again, getting close towards balance, but not really there. Pricing wise, again, ballot down by 11%. You say, but is it really? No, it's not. It's up by 11%. There were two markets which have seen it. Downtown Seattle. We've got several pre-sale condominium projects coming online right now. And the issue is pre-sales is 5% down. People are just concerned about, because you actually put money down 2 years ahead of time, essentially. Where's the market going to be? So it's commissioned to see if there's going to be sufficient demand from people other than people who are buying to rent those units out. The project on Howell Street, which we're going to see a lot of that, 70% investor buyers. So we'll see how that, I can understand how 70% investor buyers can make sense in terms of the homeowners association. It just doesn't. North Seattle, but North Seattle has dropped because North Seattle has got a very, very limited number of multifamily units. Listings again, we saw a massive jump there, despite not too surprising. But MHA, I was going to touch on this before I close. Is it important to fix it? I mean, there's two different ways to look at this. One of which is low-income housing. I'm okay with that. I mean, Plymouth Housing, Lehigh, there's some great entities out there that do good work. What we need more of is workforce housing for people making 80 to 120% of median income. So it is going to be the nurses, it is going to be the teachers, it is going to be the firefighters. Where are they going to live? So we saw some changes which have gone through. Probably you'll see some lawsuits. But my biggest concern is this. Over here? Yeah, no, I don't. 80% of the city of Seattle is zoned single family. 80%. Because zoning was created back in the 1950s, which made sense, because wealthy people lived in the suburbs and poor people lived downtown. Now it's upside down, and we're pushing people further out. So the zoning change we've seen only affects 6% of single family zoning. Is that enough? I would argue no, it's not. But the trouble is we have a lot of people known as NIMBYs. NIMBY, not in my backyard. Mainly my neighbours on Queen Anne Hill. And I say that in all seriousness. They're doing some rezoning on Roy Street and on Mercer Street, and some of my neighbours are frantic. They might lose their Space Needle view. Oh, the humanity. The But the trouble is that my neighbours are lawyers for Perkins Coie, Kennel Gaze, Dennis Wright Tremaine. They will fight it and they will win. And so we have a big issue. We want to embrace affordable housing, just build it somewhere else. Build it down the Rainier Valley somewhere. Just don't build it next to me. And that's a big issue. Because when you have zoning which says you can put 4 to 6 single-family homes on an acre, well, if you rezone that, you could put 12 to 14 cottages on that same acre. You could put 18 to 22 townhomes on that same acre. Then you're lowering the residual land value per unit. You can actually build housing which is more affordable. That's what we need to do. So it's a start, but it's certainly not a panacea. It really isn't. And to produce, what, 6,000 affordable units in 10 years? 600 a year? Really? Not going to make a difference. The upzoning we talk about, where you can you get greater density, greater height. If you offset some of those units as affordable, developers will do that. What they will do is they'll take that fee, or do a fee in lieu. They'll just hand a check over to the city and say, you build them. And good luck with that. You ever known any city at all be able to do anything on budget and on time? No. And certainly Seattle's a good example of that. So it's there, it's starting to be a change, but we need to look at it from a regional perspective, not just a citywide perspective. So, City of Seattle, yeah, I think we'll see listing activity, more choice out there if you're buying in the marketplace, but it's going to be a slowdown from that we saw on the second half of last year. There are some buyers that might just say, you know what, let me just wait and see, let's see prices stabilize. If that happens, then we'll jump in. There are some other ones that, because we are oversupplied with apartments, rental rates growth is not slowing, or has slowed rather. So you can actually rent the same unit and your rent's not going up. So some people actually say, I'm just going to take another year off. We'll see how many people actually do that. But when we see some stability and prices start rising again, that's going to get some people who are on the fences off. So 8% single family homes, and basically 8% for multifamily as well. So that's the price growth I expect to see in the city of Seattle. Fairly balanced between single family and multifamily. And yeah, we need to look at zoning. Because I do fear, if we want to keep on growing economically, which is what drives everything, right? It drives our home housing prices. You've got to figure out where people can live, that they can afford to live. Otherwise, companies, believe me, they'll start looking at other markets. They will look at Boise, they will look at Vegas, they'll look at Spokane. They'll just say, you're too rich in Seattle. I can't afford to pay people what I have to allow them to live. It's a regional problem, not just a citywide problem. And with that, you've been remarkably patient with me. I'll be delighted to answer any questions if you have any. None? Wow, really? Okay. Yes, sir.
I guess just about the zoning. I mean, if you put in more multifamily, how do you manage the traffic and like the infrastructure, especially if roadways aren't going to be extended?
Yeah, it's a great question. Now, let's look at Amazon as a great example. 40% of Amazon workers downtown Seattle walk to work. Almost 50% live in the same zip code. So that negates to a degree that issue. And so they're not driving. Now, do they have cars? Yeah, they do. And here's the interesting thing about Seattle is that we like to embrace the urban living, but we still have our cars because we want to go off and go skiing and 45 minutes up to Snoqualmie, wherever. So, but a lot actually do that walk to work. And so that doesn't necessarily put as much strain on the area. Now, if you bring in more, again, it's not going to be a substantive number. But a lot of people are. I mean, I live in Queen Anne. My house is on Fairview Avenue, South Lake Union. I walk to work. It's 1.2 miles. I can walk it every day quicker than I could drive it. Every single day. It's funny, I'm going down Mercer, and people come into town white-knuckled and screaming at each other. And I'm just listening to my podcast and calling it good. So yes, it will. But I would argue where we do see increasing mass transit, we are seeing light rail is going to come in. We are seeing increased buses. Let's look at Ballard, the 15th, for example. Now, rapid ride, that can help. But I would argue that a lot of people will choose downtown or in more urbanized markets because they won't have to use their vehicles. They will end up driving. They will end up walking to work or bicycling or whatever it may be. So it's not a perfect solution, but the trouble is we have to continue to grow. And if we don't, we're just going to start dying. So, but the concern is I don't expect to see 50 high-rises. We're not returning to Hong Kong because it's just so remarkably expensive. But unless we figure out where people can live, they can get around. We will live within 35 minutes of where we need to be work-wise. But it's got to be 35 minutes or less. It can't be 20 minutes one day and an hour and a half the next because it's raining. That's the great thing about Seattle. Apparently when it starts raining, we've forgotten how to drive in the rain. But it's no perfect solution, but I certainly think if we want to continue to grow, then we are going to have to embrace more density, because Seattle's just not a dense city. First came here in the early 90s. Never forget walking down First Avenue, stop at the library bar, opposite what was a Warshaw sporting goods store. About 4 in the afternoon, fine, busy traffic, went in, had a couple of cocktails, came out at 6. I could have fired a bazooka down First Avenue and not hit anyone. And I went to the library, I'm nosy. What's going on? Everyone worked in Seattle. No one lived there. They lived in a place called Bellevue. They got there across a bridge which had sunk the year before. Wow, this is going to have to change at some point. So we are suffering from those growing pains of any city. But it is still a function, I would argue, of increasing density, because we're really not. 80% of the city is single family. It's just not, that doesn't necessarily work if you want to continue to grow economically. Yes, sir?
What's the projected growth in value of homes that are single family, that
Good
have
God.
unobstructed views, and waterfront, unobstructed views?
Next to none. Great growth, in terms of growth of supply.
Growth.
Well, there is no supply.
Growth in price.
Oh, wow. I probably defer to Aaron on that one, what he would expect to see. I mean, anytime when you limit supply and you have net new demand, i.e. if you have waterfront views or there's something which we've only got so much waterfront, period, you always get a premium for that. There's no question about it. So I would argue this year, you'd probably be looking more than likely in that north of 10% range. That wouldn't surprise me. But again, it's such a finite market, it's impossible to forecast, because forecasting works better when you have a large database to work with, and yet waterfront's remarkably limited. So it's essentially, when you get into that situation, it's more a function of what somebody is prepared to pay for it, rather than what it's worth.
Well, what is the use of that kind of land, which I think is extraordinarily beautiful view and all that? How does the city view the potential of that land as being commercially occupied by high-rise or?
No, it won't be. I mean, waterfront certainly won't change. So that just won't happen. So they're ignoring that. Quite frankly, one, they couldn't afford it. There's no way that would work. So you have to X out that from the equation. There's no way in the world that they would even try touching that. I mean, ecologically speaking, you'd have the world to be up in arms if that was going to be the case. So that's just not going to happen. So I think you're remarkably safe in that respect. So yeah, no. Anyone else? Yes, miss.
From a buyer standpoint, what market are you excited about? What do you think?
What markets do I get excited about? Oh, what a great question. Markets that excite me right now. There's some you might not be surprised about, others you might be. Burien is one, which I think is an absolute player. Parts of West Seattle still. White Center. And I would have thought White Center, right? If you'd have said to me 5 years ago, Gardner, in 5 years' time you'll be saying White Center is going to be a player, I'd have laughed at you, literally. No, south of Delridge, absolutely, and it will. South of Othello Station, so actually the next station, which is Rainier Beach. So one stop south of Othello Station. I also say Mount Baker, absolutely. So again, what I have in common with these things, again, it's these first-ring ex-urban markets. Now, ultimately, I was chatting with Dow Constantine a couple of months ago. He wants to look at the Duwamish Corridor as being an area to rezone, because it's massive, it's got a lot of land there, but the trouble is, the industrial community will be up in arms. Now, I'm doing analysis of the city on Terminal 92, pretty close to here, on what it should be. And the issue was, there's a group called BINMIC, the Ballard Interbay Magnolia Industrial Council, membership 6. But they were remarkably noisy 6. And they're like, no, you're going to be getting rid of blue-collar jobs, you can't do it. And so the city plan evaporated purely because of that. So I would say the Duwamish Corridor is an area which at some top point, if Dow gets his way, will become it. But I would definitely say Burien, Mount Baker, certainly. I think still parts of Central District. But if you get too much in the Central District, there's a philosophical issue there, again, on pricing people out. I don't see it happening in the International District, because land ownership is so fractured. You either land's owned by either Chinese families or Japanese families, and they still hate each other from World War II. So that doesn't help. So I think we'll then jump over the ID and head down Rainier Avenue, quite frankly. So those are the areas which I expect to see longer term some fairly significant price growth. Again, out of town, but still, relatively speaking, proximate to it. Anyone else? Am I done? Oh, Aaron?
So you talked about gaining an income to buy a house. What is the historic ratio between housing prices and incomes, and where is that today here in Seattle?
Oh, God. It's about 3.5 to 4 to 1, historically speaking, but also understand that excludes the down payment. Otherwise, if you said you're doing 100% leverage, then no one can ever buy anything. So again, and here right now it's probably closer to 5.5 to 1. So that again, that limits affordability. Therefore, the affordability index is below 100, which is balanced. So it is getting hard, and certainly it's even harder for that first-time buyer just to get their first rung of the ladder. And the trouble is, if they can't afford to buy somewhere here, the person selling, that first-time move-up buyer, well, they can't buy. All of a sudden, they're stuck in terms of trying to figure out who I can sell my home to so I can do that next step up. And then beyond that, the move-down buyer, as I mentioned earlier, they're not moving. So you can have a bit of a logjam going on. We have a lot of demand at the bottom end of the market in terms of first-time buyers rather than how you're defining bottom. But I'd say, yeah, I think in Seattle we're about 5.5. It's nothing like the Bay Area, which is closer to 9. So yeah, it's pretty insane. Yes, sir?
Do you see a lot of affordability issues getting fixed over the next 10, 20, 30 years with just more people working from home?
Working from home. Yeah, I mean, the telecommuting was interesting. It was something which became hip about a decade ago. And everyone thought it was going to be a great idea. You know, you kind of roll out of bed in your bunny slippers downstairs, and here you are working. It failed, and it failed horribly. And here's why it failed. One of which is companies thought their staff weren't working. They thought they were doing the laundry, watching daytime TV, not getting their stuff done. But more importantly was the employees. The employees missed the symbiosis of the chats around the water cooler, right? They missed that chatting with their compatriots rather than feeling so far removed. Now you still see a reasonable number of people will work from home maybe a day, possibly 2 days a week, but not permanently speaking. So whereas it was thought that that's what we'd all be doing, that's going to relieve pressure on highways, and everything's going to be fine, just it hasn't worked. So it was an interesting theory, and certainly technology was out there to do it. It just, on both sides of the equation, has not been adopted to the levels that a lot of people thought it was going to be. Aaron? Oh, no, you asked yours, didn't you? Yes, sir.
So have we seen a peak on areas around where the light rail is going in, but north and east, or is there still potential?
There's potential. I mean, transit development is going to be an important thing. What I would argue about that is I think we need to broaden the area rather than a quarter-mile radius, make it larger, and also allow for a greater height, a greater density in these station areas. But once you move further out, what's going to be increasingly important is where are people going to park? A lot of people will end up driving to light rail and then getting the train in. That's great. You might remember a few years ago, we did a major resurfacing of I-5 from the south end, and a lot of people back then did, for the first time ever, wasn't light rail, but it was Sound Transit, out of stations like Auburn. And the trouble is that they got to the station, they couldn't find anywhere to park. People were renting out their front yards for $40 a day. To literally have people say, so that's the problem. So I think all these station areas figured out they were massively underparked. And that, I think, again, the further you go away, it's going to be a massive problem. Because if you don't do that, you're presuming somebody will get a lift or they're going to walk. Now, we'll walk half a mile easily to a light rail station, depending on topography. But further out than that, if you want to utilize it, you're going to be driving or your bicycle or whatever. Now, bicycling's fine, but if you're driving a car, it's going to be massively problematic if we don't park it adequately. And that, I think, is a great question. I think it's going to be a very big issue still. Yes, sir?
Do you have any thoughts on national Class C garden-style apartment complexes?
Yeah.
19 and 20?
Yeah. I think if you look at the nation as a whole in terms of the different spectrum of apartments, I think cap rates for Class A are pretty much going to stay stable. I expect to see some further cap rate compression in Class B and Class C. So I think the interest, so that's got a technical language for returns. But where it's going to be is, I think, that we are becoming massively oversupplied in Class A and remarkably expensive rents. You're renting a new high-rise apartment unit today, downtown Seattle, $4 a foot, 1,000 square feet, $4,000 a month. And so why do we do that? We overbuilt because back in 2012, when the equity markets thawed, the only asset class you could borrow money on to build anything were apartments. And you weren't going to borrow money to build an office or a single family or a condo. So the Wad and his wife became apartment developers. Dear friend of mine, Matt Griffin. Matt's a great guy. He built Pacific Place, if you know that project downtown. He's a retail guy. He called me up one day and said, Matt, I want you to do a study. I want to build an apartment project. I'm like, Matt, I love you like a brother, but you don't know crap about building apartments. And he did. He said, well, yeah, I know, but I'm going to. He ended up building Via 6, the single largest apartment project ever built in Seattle, 654 units. So he did. So we had a massive oversupply, which is what we're suffering from today. Now, going forward, I think there's a lot of greater development interest and demand interest from suburban, from that Class B or even Class C, down to the kind of Woody Walker apartments, which is what I call them, because of price point. And so I think that they are going to see further cap rate compression, because I expect rental rate growth still to be pretty solid. So I think there's interest there, not just from the individual standpoint, but the investor standpoint as well. And so I think, we'll see a trickling down in cap rates across the country for Class B and for Class C. We are likely not to see that for Class A. Yes, sir?
So what's your outlook for the Tacoma area? I think before you said all is right in the world.
Yeah, Tacoma's growing. Tacoma has it's doing great one second, and then the next second it's not. So kind of a State Farm are there, now State Farm's not. I mean, so you have these, the major employers who've kind of been very frenetic. Russell Investments was there, and then they're not. So they were replaced by State Farm. They were there, and now they're not. Tacoma wants to be a player, but when you talk about growth economically, I don't think it's going to jump from Seattle or from Bellevue straight down to Tacoma. It's what I define as a ripple effect. So why are we seeing greater interest in markets like Kirkland, Google obviously, like Renton? Now Michael Chris has got almost 1 million square feet under construction there. He's trying to attract another Google. So I think it's going to have to see demand for those areas grow and fill up, and then it's going to continue to work its way south. So whereas we had Seattle, which was great, Bellevue up until 1999 was kind of the stepchild of Seattle, quite frankly, until Symetra Financial opened their global headquarters there. They became a player. It will get to Tacoma before it gets to Everett, that I guarantee you. But at the same time, is it going to be quick? No, I mean, Minimums is under construction. So something's going on there, but I think it's going to take a while, more than a car museum and a UW Outreach Center, for it to actually work. But it's going to grow organically, but job growth in Pierce County this year probably going to be close to 6,000 jobs, that's it. So they're still expanding, but not dramatically. And I would expect to see more growth in the areas between here and Tacoma first to occur. But it will get there at some point. It's just probably certainly not this cycle. Yes, sir?
For like long-term retirement estate planning for the Seattle metro area, what would you forecast over the next 20, 30 years as just like a good average house price appreciation in excess of inflation?
Yeah, well, I mean, if you look at the numbers I showed you earlier on, we historically grow by somewhere between 5 and 6%. And that's been the average between 1999 and 2018. So just after inflation, you're looking in real terms, rather nominal, of somewhere around 3.5%. Which I think is a very reasonable figure. Again, the advantage we have is the fact we have too much water, we have too many mountains, and lousy mass transit infrastructure today, which will change, but by the time it gets built out. Let's start aside to that. Any of you guys been to Atlanta? Okay. Here's why I say this. Back in 1969, the federal government were going to give us as much money as we borrowed on bond for ST3, literally. And we voted it down because we didn't want people moving to Seattle. And then it came up again in 1972, and we voted it down because Boeing was going down. So if you've been to Atlanta, if you've traveled on MARTA, their mass transit system, that's ours. Literally. They got our money, and that's what built their entire system 40 years ago. So, I know it's a bit of a digression, but I always have to get that one out there. But I would say, given supply and demand, given mobility, and certainly if you're in the city of Seattle, we'll still see home prices appreciate at a greater rate than you will do in Tacoma or up in Everett, or even further out towards Issaquah and beyond. Yeah, if you were to put in there on a real inflation-adjusted basis, 3 to 3.5% would not be unreasonable at all. Yes, ma'am.
Any thoughts on the liverboard market, both
Where?
liverboard and water, liverboard or houseboats?
Houseboat? Well, God, I know nothing about houseboats. Houseboats. Well, the issue with houseboats is, one, you can't leverage it, i.e. you can't get a mortgage on one. So it's that then limits your potential pool of buyers. I think it's wickedly cool. I really do. Certainly in South Lake Union we have a lot of them. It's not for everyone, but in terms of demand, most that come on the market seem to sell pretty quickly for quite high prices, quite frankly, depending on how close to the I-5 to Aurora Bridge you are. But I think that the only issue that I have with them is the fact that you can't get a conventional mortgage on one. So your cost of capital is going to be that much higher than it would be on a normal structure. So are they there? Yeah, they are. Are they great? Yes, but I don't really dabble in the houseboat world too much. But yeah, I think they're great. We have a great, ones I've been to, very small but very functional, but also can be very expensive. So my issue is quite frankly on financing them. I think why that limits your demand for people that just would like to buy one, but they want to get a mortgage on it but can't afford it. Am I done? Am I done? Well, thank you very much. Hopefully that's something on my comments.
Thank you everybody for coming out tonight, and don't forget we are going to have our next